Listen.
Posłuchaj.
Écoute.
Escucha. MCO.
Listen.
MCO.
MCO.
Between the bars.
It sounds shocking to me to know one will never go back to one's roots.
Yes, even when I go back to Moldova, it's not the same anymore. Not same people, not same mentality. It's only the soil, the earth, the same color, but not even the air. It's so much more dirty. So many cars and people. We are not aware of what we have in the moment we have it, only when we lose it.
I'm Yannick Dondelanger, and this is Between the Bars, the podcast of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. Welcome to part 2 of The Big Goodbye, a very personal conversation with violinist, concert creator, and the musical voice of climate conscience, Patricia Kopatchinskaja. With her latest staged concert project, Les Adieux, Kopatchinskaja is saying goodbye to nature and to life as we know it, in the face of climate change and the increasing odds against dealing with it. You're listening to the MCO and Patricia perform the Storm Movement from Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, at the same time as video and image taken from news media footage of major weather disasters, from floods to hurricanes to extreme heat and forest fires around the world, are played back on TV screens placed behind and within the Mahler Chamber Orchestra on stage. It's a thought-provoking idea, Patricia's. A juxtaposition of Beethoven's painstakingly realistic musical analysis of what a real storm might actually sound like, alongside images showing how climate change supercharges the frequency and ferocity of today's weather events, to the extent that these often horrific disasters should be a warning of just how little us Homo sapiens are in control of how we change the balance of our planet. But Patricia's passion for nature lies not only in her artistic activism, but also in a childhood where she was blessed with an almost once-upon-a-time feeling of harmony and balance between sound and nature. If it's okay, can we go back in time now? I'm very interested when you first became aware of nature and its connection to climate change. I read some, I think they're fascinating words from you about your childhood in the countryside in Moldova, where you grew up. And you said, "My first teacher was the rain. I listened to the drops. They were the first short, round notes in my childhood imagination. Then came the sun. The notes became longer and more transparent, beginning in the clouds and disappearing into infinity. And then wind taught me momentum. The night taught me silence." And the quote continues, and I can see you start to laugh there. But it's an amazing recollection of being aware of nature at probably a very young age. I grew up in the middle of London. I don't know if I had that going through my head when I was a child. Can you tell us about that?
Well, what is nature? It's your surrounding. You can call nature also your furniture, your the pictures you see on the wall, the light through your windows, your mother. I don't know what is nature. It's not necessarily a tree, but it's something that you cherish, something that you care about, that becomes the inspiration. Your imagination is dealing with everything that surrounds you. But in Moldova, I was very lucky growing up at my grandparents' place, because they were very simple people. There was nothing but quiet, and they were very thankful. I think this is what we miss a lot. We are never thankful. We are looking for something better, more, faster. And they were completely in one sound with the nature, if you want, and with their destiny also.
Now, in your life, you lead what has to be a pressured life. Everyone knows that as a soloist. And you come from a timeless childhood.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about that mismatch?
I am anyway torn between worlds. I lost my homeland, and I think it's forever. I will never find again my homeland.
Moldova.
Yeah. And it's not only the geographical thing, it's the place where I am quiet, where I feel balanced. And I'm aiming for that in the music, or maybe I even disturb it even more. I don't know.
Someone was telling me today about the word Heimat. It's very difficult to translate the word Heimat into English. It's the place where you belong. Heimat, the place where one has one's home. So your Heimat, as it were, is...
Well, I think everyone feels different. I am at home where I feel being loved and supported. In how I am, where I don't need to prove any of my facilities, where I don't need to do anything, just being myself. And my home is in the sounds, on stage, I think. This is really something that nobody could take away from me.
Perfection, convention, and tradition. So these are words that you've often, also in rehearsal, but in the articles I read about you, you've often spoken out against and rebelled against in your concerts. And with a project like Les Adieux, a project that really turns the concert experience concretely upside down, do you ever feel extra pressure that the audience should understand your message, or is it okay for them to not always be on board? And I ask this quite specifically because sometimes you appear to be really frustrated when you're misunderstood and not able to get your point through.
Well, I'm 45 now. I think the audience is more or less sorted out. I don't think people come to my concert kind of people that are not curious, that is not open-minded. I think with the time they know if they come to my concerts, they will hear something that they will think about afterwards, maybe, or be surprised or something like this. But also, I don't feel any pressure to surprise someone. It's not necessary to rebel all my life. I think the most important is not me at all. It's just the music, to show what is the soul of every single piece and what it tells me in this very moment. What do I understand? What is my dialogue with this piece? I don't even speak about the composer. The composer is the father, and sometimes the piece doesn't want to listen to it, to the father.
Very often.
Very often, yeah. And it has its own destiny. There are pieces which are through the time, they change somehow. They become also old and fat and heavy, slow. I would like to remind them on their childhood, for example, and start to play again with them games, different games. Ask them. And there is no wrong or right. There are no criteria like this. It's just a game. And if you think about playing, spielen, it's like a cat and mouse, if you want, with the same toys, maybe, but different games. As you saw, we play Bach here, and nobody has any idea what is right, how to play it. We have just a text, no dynamic, no tempo, notes. And then we have to invent our story with that piece of music. And maybe Bach thought completely different, but it does really not matter anymore, because we are now, and it's us who have to get into a contact with our audience.
Going back to our journey now through travelling through Les Adieux, as it develops, it has increasing references to death and what dying looks like, and to tragedy and to loss, and having to say goodbye. Very difficult concepts. After the storm movement of the fourth movement in the Pastorale, for example, we don't finish with the sun coming out with the fifth movement. Suddenly we're into the Marche Funèbre from his third symphony. And in this context, we are saying goodbye to animal life, the animal kingdom, and it's accompanied by a procession of quite actually beautifully, stunningly projected drawings. Tell us more about what you want to show the audience in that moment, what's happening.
Well, it was impossible for me to play the last movement of Pastorale because it's about the gratitude. And I don't think that we deserve it. I think instead of that, we have to face that this is now time not only to say goodbye, but to say goodbye to the nature, but to say goodbye to ourselves as well. And this is really a black color which comes over all this shiny world which we imagined before. And the animals you see, they are in a very, very old book where Gessner collected, he was the first collector of all these drawings of different animals all over the world. Also Dürer he collected the drawings, and there are also animals that don't exist even. If you see the lion is a very strange animal. There are also people walking. This is what the video artist added to that. We worked together with an incredible team, and having said my idea, they developed it. And how it looks now, it's a reimagination of what I imagined. And seeing these animals walking into the death, playing the Marcia Funèbre for them, I think it's a very strong moment, maybe the strongest in the whole concert. Then suddenly it really starts to be very direct and very clear. What is it about? Actually, the whole thing is a big funeral, and in the end we play for ourselves. In Shostakovich, this is already the end of ourselves, like being on a Titanic, on a boat with all our humanity and imagination of the vision of how should it be. We all go down, and the musicians, we always will play, even for our funeral. The last notes I will hear in my mind. It will be last sounds. It will be music.
In the history of disasters, the tragedy of the Titanic has to be one of the most famous. And while its relevance to climate crisis in the 21st century might not seem immediately obvious, there are at least two aspects to the story that it would be wise to pay attention to. One, the fact it was a man-made disaster. So yes, not the iceberg's fault. And two, how the microcosm of humanity on board, as Patricia puts it, dealt with its sinking home. In a way, today's globalised society is our Titanic, built in large part on hubris, pride and arrogance, with little attention to equality in our species, and no care or respect for the environment we live in, travel through and exploit. planet Earth. This may sound a bit harsh, but to continue the Titanic analogy, after reaching for the stars to build our improbably huge floating palace to industrial and commercial imperialism, we steam ahead full speed through the environment, regardless, scraping by the tip of nature's iceberg, not realizing that the magnitude of damage of our actions lies hidden under the water. After wasted minutes arguing over critical mistakes made, flawed designs, repeatedly ignored warnings, cavalier management, pressure to impress and perform, it is time for our global society to rescue itself from going down. And rescue ourselves we do, but as individuals, or at least small packs, not as a socially responsible community. And society goes down, with musicians playing at the funeral. Whether the story of the Titanic is a strong analogy or not, rising sea levels and searing heat waves kill millions of the poorest humans in our global society, while a handful of billionaires are building space rockets to pleasure boat the rich, or as some commentators say, pleasure lifeboat the rich out to the stars. I'm not talking in a tone of sour grapes here, but more gross negligence at the helm of humankind.
The art has a very big power compared with scientists who speak to us with numbers, and I have no relationship to numbers. I don't feel them. I cannot imagine them. And so many people as well. So it doesn't really touch me. But I think we, musicians, we have this power and we are watched for 2 hours long.
Next time, in the third and last part of The Big Goodbye, Patricia Kopatchinskaja discusses, amongst other things, climate anxiety, Corona and life without music, and what happens at the end of her climate concert, Les Adieux. So you can see what me and Patricia Kopatchinskaja have been talking about. The Les Adieux concert is available to stream on YouTube and also the website of the Elbphilharmonie Concert Hall. Just go to the menu and select Mediatek. Thank you to Patricia Kopatchinskaja and the musicians of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra for their performance of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. Les Adieux is a co-production of Ludwigsburger Schlossfestspiele, Stiftung Berliner Philharmoniker, Elbphilharmonie Hamburg, and the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. This episode has been generously supported by the German Federal Government Commissioner for Culture and the Media through Neustart Kultur, a funding program for digital content production in cultural organizations. Don't forget, there are other episodes of Between the Bars to listen to, and you can email with any thoughts you have to podcast@mahlerchamber.com, or if you prefer, leave a review or a rating on Apple or Spotify. Between the Bars team is Matthias Meyer, Rick Willebrotz, and me, Yannick Dondelanger. Don't forget, keep listening.
Between the Bars.